It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received, for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. So, why would I talk about Mr. Charles Dickens' perspective? So I think so much when we talk about generations. The construct of a generation, it is a construct, is continual waves of change. And each of us, we live, this is an extraordinary group of people at an extraordinary time in an extraordinary place. And each of us is trying to figure out how we understand, how we make sense of the world, how we think of the ways that we are working with others to be able to continually make a better world. And so we come up with this construct of generations. We've been talking a lot about the Greek sources of words. It's actually Latin, so it wasn't my choice, but the source is generate, which doesn't help us very much, but generare, it's to produce. And so what do we think that any generation is supposed to produce? What is it supposed to do where it stands in the waves of change? There's always some wave in the past. There's something we need to honor. Every generation needs to honor its past, and here we are rooted in the past. It needs to look through the lens of the present, and then needs to prepare for the future. And it needs to also pave the way for the next generation. So think about this for you. You have these. You have a foot in each one of these contexts. You have your own past, you have your present, and then what you're trying to do is we're all working together to try to change the future, and especially in the context of work. How do we think about that? Well, so let's just say I could wave a magic wand, and does anybody here remember the day they were born? Does anybody remember that? Go back to, okay, so I wave a magic wand, and the nurse brings you to your parents and says, here's this beautiful baby. And oh, by the way, here's the user manual. Here's all the skills this baby is going to have. Here's all of the kinds of problems this baby is going to want to solve. Here's all of the kinds of people this baby is going to want to be around. Here's all the places in the world this baby is going to want to be. You have a user manual for your digital distraction machine, this device none of us can leave home without. Why don't you have a user manual for you? Well, we don't. We don't. We have to become what I call trial and error machines. And often I use the picture of an iceberg, which in the period of global climate change is quite ironic, but each of us, we have only a thin layer of understanding of our own skills, our own ability to be able to solve different problems, and there's a whole bunch of capacity, of human potential that's below the waterline, and I think that's true for all humans. So how do we think about that process then of figuring out the kinds of problems that we want to solve? I often say that work, if we were to make it just simply mechanically, is human skills applied to tasks to solve problems. And we each choose the problems that we want to solve. And sometimes they're tiny problems, and we're hummingbirds bringing a little bit of water to affect the forest fire. In other cases, we pick really big problems, problems that we all want to be able to impact. And that, I think, is a great opportunity for any generation. So how do we think now about our work and about the kinds of work that we want to be able to have an impact for? I talk a lot about mindset, skill set, and tool set. So why are these three important? So mindset, as we're all talking here, we're all collaborating, we're all trying to figure out how it is that we help the world to see the challenges that we see and to try to come up with the kinds of solutions that we think are most important. Our mindset, the way that we approach these problems, actually defines the solutions that we're going to all develop together. Our skill set is the way that we channel our human energy. From the moment you're born until far later on, there's only a finite amount of energy that each of us have, and how we can channel that to solve particular kinds of problems. And then finally, the tool set, the ways that our techniques and our technologies, Karen was just talking about design thinking. We were talking earlier about artificial intelligence tools. That tool set will always change, and sometimes it will have a huge impact on human work and human learning. So I think this is our opportunity right now, as we're talking about what it is that Generation Alpha can do. We need to think about, well, what do we want to define what that generation needs to produce? There's actually having this conversation with Andrianos and Claire and Zinnia last night. So, so let me just give you a basic construct for work, and then hopefully this will sort of set up some of the dialogue at dinner. So there's sort of 4 things that each of us want in work. The first thing is, remember the first job that you had, the first cruddy job? You know, when you, what was your deliverable? You just had to get paid, right? Just wanted to get paid. I'm known around the world by 2 titles. I'm often called either Professor Gary or Uncle G. If you're under 25, you call me Uncle G. So I get calls all the time from the young people that I mentor. Uncle G, I just got a job. Oh, that's great. That's great. How much are you getting paid? Dead silence. I forgot to ask because you just want to get paid. And then somebody puts their arm around your shoulder when you're first starting to learn to work, and they say, you know what, if you get good at this, you're going to get paid better. Ah, okay. So these are the old rules of work. This is what our parents did, our grandparents, is, you know, just feed your family and put a roof over their head, and that was just fine. And then my father came along, who was a recovering minister who just happened to become the world's career counselor. He said, wait a minute, what if I tell you you can also do what you love? What if you can work with the people that you love to work with, or solve the problems you love to solve, or you can focus on using the skills you most love to use? And then in those old rules of work, what was the final step? Maybe you would help out in the local food bank. You would do something that the world needs. So I know there's some nods in the crowd. What we can get paid for, what we are good at, what we love to do, and what the world needs is called ikigai. And in Japan, and especially in Okinawa, some of the world's longest lived people, it's not a life well lived unless you have all 4 of those things. So as we think about generations, as we think of those waves of change, as what each generation produces, this generation that is coming up, and it's not just them, it's people young and old, but especially this generation that's just coming up, have flipped that stack. They first ask, what does the world need? If I can do that, then I'm going to love it. If I love it, I'm going to get good at it. If I get good at it, I'll eventually get paid for it. Parents ask me all the time, why won't my kid get a real job? CEOs of companies ask me all the time, why do young people come to my company and start talking about purpose? I never asked about purpose. But this is where we are at this generation inflection point. Each of us wants to think we're at that unique point in time, as Mr. Dickens told us. We are at that unique point in time. This is a different generation. This is a different opportunity. And if each of us in our work, in the way that we coordinate and collaborate together, if we can do all 4 of these things, then we'll make sure that no human gets left behind. Thank you.